A mysterious unnamed rapper, alleged coerced sex acts, a major blow-up. Key Diddy accuser Jane has wrapped up her testimony and faced a lot of questions from the rap mogul's attorney. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey everybody, this is another Law&Crime legal alert. So recent allegations against the multi-billion-dollar video game industry, they claim that video games are engineered for addiction. Yeah, these claims include trying to make sense of the hold that video games seem to have over people, where they just can't put the controller down. Every win triggers that hit of dopamine, and that creates a cycle of compulsion, which disrupts daily life and it harms mental health. But our legal sponsors are taking on the industry that has at many times put profit over safety, and they're working to potentially get compensation for all of those impacted. So if you or a loved one have suffered physical or mental health issues due to video games, then visit vgclaims.com/sidebar to answer less than 10 questions and check your eligibility to file a claim. Another significant day in the Sean Diddy Combs criminal trial. The defense wrapped up their questioning, their cross-examination of accuser Jane. She's officially off the stand. She was questioned once again by the prosecution. We'll get into that too. But this is Sean Combs' former love interest, who claims that essentially she was pressured into sex acts with other men as Combs watched and pleasured himself. Hotel nights, debauchery nights. Claims that Combs was physically violent with her. Claims that he forced her to engage in these sex sessions when she was sick, exhausted, that she was taking drugs, that these were prolonged for hours on end. But as we've been talking about all week since she's been facing cross-examination from the defense, there have been openings for Sean Combs' defense team to exploit. And it seems that is certainly what they have been doing. About whether or not she was a willing participant. Did she set up these events? Did she encourage them? Did she arrange the travel and pay for these male performers? Was she fueled by jealousy in her relationship with Sean Combs as opposed to being a victim of sex trafficking? These are the important questions that the jury's going to have to wrestle with. So let's talk about what happened today. Let's talk about the culmination of her cross-examination, what the prosecution did when they got a chance to question her as well. And also there was something going on about this mysterious unnamed rapper. Let's talk about it. Let me bring in Law&Crime's in-court reporter, Elizabeth Millner, who's been inside that courtroom for every day of the testimony. Elizabeth, it's good to see you. Before we even talk about Jane, though, and well, before we even get into the cross-examination, my understanding is there was a bit of a back and forth about whether or not the judge was going to let in some pieces of evidence. I think one was an audio recording from Sean Combs, and one was some sort of personal note or maybe even a diary entry or journal entry from Jane. What's going on there?
Yeah, so these were conversations that took place outside of the jury. So before Jane got back on the witness stand today, as well as the jury even coming in for the start of the day, because we did have a pretty delayed start this morning. But as far as just some of the evidentiary issues that both parties were discussing this morning, the defense wanted to introduce a particular audio message that Diddy had recorded around December 20th of 2023. And so the defense was arguing in Jane's direct testimony that she said she told Diddy she didn't want to be doing these hotel nights going back all the way to 2021. And so they were saying that this particular audio message would go to Diddy's state of mind. And so again, this audio message from December 20th of 2023, where Diddy was saying something along the lines to Jane that he was unaware and never understood how she really felt about doing these hotel nights. And again, just putting this into context, the two started dating in 2021, and Diddy is saying in 2023 that he had no idea that she didn't want to be doing these hotel nights. And they were saying that they being the defense, that the government opened the door to let this piece of audio message in, but the government was kind of like, well, this time period elicited under direct was about 2024, and that was the end of their relationship. And they were saying that it's a 403 issue and that Diddy was possibly trying to feed a false narrative around this time frame, because again, context is a little bit of everything in this case, because December 20th of 2023 was a month after Cassie had filed her federal lawsuit and also settled within that next day. And so the government was kind of like, we don't know if this statement is actually truthful, and we don't know if, again, that Sean Combs was trying to feed this particular narrative to Jane, because again, Jane was expressing that she kind of felt the same way as Cassie did in certain pages of her lawsuit, and Diddy's now saying, okay, I didn't know that you felt this way. And so the government was saying that this is an attempt to get in his own statement as hearsay. Now, they said if the defendant wants to go up there himself and talk about this as a witness, as he would testify when the defense takes over and starts to do their case, the government said, hey, that's fine, you can totally do that. But as far as this particular audio message, the judge ruled in favor of the government. so the objection was sustained. Now, as far as the other exhibit and the other evidentiary issue, it had to do a lot with Jane and her kind of notes that she was making to herself within her notes app on her phone, kind of similar to diary entries. And so the government wanted to use this particular diary entry from around the time after Cassie had filed her lawsuit, and this was a diary/note entry from Jane herself. And so they wanted to use this particular note under redirect. So they didn't use it under direct, so they were trying to get it in under redirect because, again, around this time frame, the defense was still doing the cross-examination. And so the government was saying kind of the opposite what the defense was saying in the last argument, that the government said the defense opened the door. And the note itself, now we didn't see it because obviously the exhibits are still, they were kept closed from us in the public, us in the press, because Jane was still testifying. But what we did learn is that this note was also around that same time frame, December of 2023, where Jane was saying something along the lines of she felt manipulated, she felt obligated to be doing these hotel nights about 98% of the time. And the government said that this particular note that she had wrote to herself and might have also sent to Diddy, that it rebuts her cross-examination. But the defense was like, well, there's no probative value and it's unnecessary. And the government says they just really wanted to get in that one particular statement. They said it's under Rule 803, and Jesse, you can talk more about that. I obviously don't know what Rule 803 is, but that the government was saying that she didn't do this because she was scared of criminal prosecution, that she was doing this because this really kind of went to her state of mind of around that time. Now, initially the judge did reserve his ruling on that particular sentence, but they picked that up, I think it was post the lunch break, and the defense was saying that Jane kind of did have a financial motive, and again, context is everything, where they were saying this note was coming in after December of 2023, so a month after Cassie had filed her lawsuit. So they were saying, okay, well, maybe it's possible that Jane had a financial motive because she had asked for $100,000 from Diddy for everything that she had endured throughout their 3-year relationship, and she didn't ask for it in a civil suit. She didn't ask it through a lawyer. She sent this through a particular text message. And so what ended up happening is the judge denied the government's application to admit this particular statement. So unfortunately, the jury was not able to see this statement whenever Jane got back on the stand and whenever the government did redirect her testimony towards the end of the day today.
Yeah. Rule 803 is an exception to hearsay, and there's a number of different exceptions. Hearsay, out-of-court statement offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. Here's the thing. When I hear the idea of him having a recording that allegedly would be used to feed a narrative, I go back to what Mia testified to, that after Cassie's lawsuit, she gets contacted allegedly by D-Rock, Sean Combs' former bodyguard, basically trying to say, hey, yeah, everything between Cassie and Sean, that was normal. That was normal. Like trying to make sure she gets on the same page, and that he was trying to make sure Sean Combs could reach out to her, that he wanted to give her a gift, bribery, obstruction, tampering with witnesses. That is all the narrative being put forward by the prosecution, and it also makes one of the elements or potential elements of racketeering, this criminal enterprise charge. Let me go now into the cross-examination of Jane. There has been a lot of talk today, particularly when I was covering the lunchtime show on Law&Crime's YouTube page, about this mysterious rapper. Something happened, this encounter happened in 2024, Las Vegas. There's an unnamed rapper, either the rapper's wife or girlfriend, and apparently one of the alleged sex workers that Jane and Sean Combs had used in their private sessions was brought up. What was this all about?
So if you've been following Jane's testimony, I know you have, Jesse, but to our viewers, if you've been following Jane's testimony, she had mentioned this particular trip to Vegas that happened in January of 2024. So again, context is everything. This was a time that Diddy and Jane were in an off period from their relationship. They had taken a break, but Jane had gone to Vegas with this unnamed rapper because they were pretty adamant today not to say this rapper's name in court. And there's kind of a reason why, and I'll get to it in just a second, but it's interesting because Jane around this time was telling Diddy that she loved and missed him, but the two weren't speaking during this particular month at the same time. But Jane ended up going to Vegas with this unnamed rapper, flew on his private jet, but also with his girlfriend/wife, unclear on who that is. But what we did learn today is that Diddy is particularly close in friendship with this particular rapper, and that the defense referred to this, again, unnamed rapper as an icon. And so reading in between the lines, you can kind of see possibly possibly who it might be. But Jane said that she was surprised to see Anton, the entertainer slash escort, there at this particular Vegas trip, because if you remember under her testimony, she had said that Anton was there and he was having sex with a woman on a bed, and a bunch of people were kind of watching all of this, and this again being in Vegas. And Anton also knew this unnamed rapper who had this connection or friendship with Diddy, and Anton also knew this unnamed rapper's girlfriend slash wife, because the defense kind of said it's his girlfriend, it's his wife, so we don't know what their state of the relationship is. But Jane was explaining that 7 or 8 people were in this room kind of watching Anton have sex with this woman, and that Jane admitted that she flirted with this particular unnamed rapper, and that Jane had previously told the government in previous interviews that she flashed her breasts during this encounter, this flirtation that was going on in this hotel room, and that she began dancing during this, and that the rapper told Jane that she was beautiful and that he wanted to F her. And so I think what the defense was trying to do when pointing out this particular January 2024 Vegas trip was kind of trying to say that Jane would also reach out to the entertainers or the escorts outside of her relationship with Diddy, because in this particular case, she was recommending an entertainer that she and Diddy used to this unnamed rapper and to his girlfriend slash wife, because they were, the unnamed rapper and his girlfriend slash wife were a part of the lifestyle. And so Jane was kind of recommending Cabral to them. And so the jury was able to see text exhibits. And initially Jane was saying things along the lines of Merry Christmas, hope you had a beautiful holiday. And then Cabral texted a few days later saying, good afternoon, beautiful, I'll be in your city on the 7th. And Jane was responding, hey Cabral, good morning, what time is your flight today? Those types of things. And so at the end, what we did learn, because I know there's been a lot of talk about who this unnamed rapper is, they didn't say who this person was during testimony today, but it seemed like the defense's whole point of even bringing up this particular trip is one, that Diddy was upset that other people knew that Jane and him were kind of engaged in this lifestyle based off the fact that Jane had recommended Cabral, an entertainer that the two have used in hotel nights, to this unnamed rapper.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I wonder the jury might take away. One, like you said, if she is having this communication, this relationship with one of the sex workers who's being used essentially, right, in this crime, if the jury's accepting this as sex trafficking in this crime, kind of muddies the waters on that, makes it a little bit more gray. Is she really a victim of sex trafficking? I also think, her allegedly flashing her breasts, it kind of goes a little bit to her lifestyle and her character. But also, I think it seems to me, if the allegation is you have this unnamed rapper who's interested in bringing someone into their relationship, it's maybe normalizing this behavior, and maybe it's not necessarily, a sex trafficking criminal enterprise as the prosecution is trying to allege. Maybe that's where they're going. I do understand, though, whether it was because of this or something else, what was a big event that happened that was talked about in trial today was this blow-up, this fight that happened between Sean Combs and Jane that was quite violent, right? And it wasn't just violence, at least the way that was described, from Combs directed to Jane. It was vice versa too, right? This was a fight. What happened here?
Yeah, so this was a fight that took place in June of 2024, so around this time frame just last year, where afterwards or before this incident had occurred, Diddy and his family went on a road trip, and then after coming back from this road trip, that Diddy went over to Jane's house on this specific date of June 18th. And if you've been following Jane's testimony very closely, she alleged under direct that she was beaten and then made to do a hotel night or give oral sex to an entertainer even after being beaten by Diddy. But under the cross-examination, they really kind of peeled back just a little bit more as far as just kind of how everything led up to what it ended up happening. And so the jury was able to see exhibits, and that was being the decorations laid out inside of Jane's home where Diddy pays the rent for, but that Jane had set up just kind of candles and champagne and tequila shots, and then Jonathan, Diddy's assistant, came over and set up kind of the red lights in the room. And so the red lights turned on once it got dark, so the jury was able to see these particular photos, because again, remember, we can't see the exhibits while Jane has been testifying, but we did hear about some of the exhibits that the jury did see. For example, photos of Jane and Diddy together, photos of them on the patio, photos of the red lights, and then even video from that night where Diddy is kind of talking about the Boston Celtics, and then it's over the song Lovely Day, and so the jury was able to see all of that. But Jane had testified under direct 30 minutes after taking that particular video where the Lovely Day song is playing, that this was 30 minutes after she took that video. That's when the physical assault occurred. And so Jane was saying, while she was still being cross-examined, that she and Diddy both had about 2 to 3 glasses of champagne. I think Diddy may have had 1 more glass more than her, and both took 2 shots of tequila. But Jane said that she had a feeling that another girl was on that family trip that Diddy had just returned from. And so the defense was kind of like, okay, well, you're saying that another girl was on this trip, but did you have any proof that another girl was on this trip? I think trying to insinuate that this reaction out of Jane came out of nowhere. She had no proof that Diddy was with anyone besides his family. And so what ended up happening is that Jane got pretty upset. She threw glasses at Diddy. She threw candles at him. The wax got on him. And the defense was kind of trying to point out that there wasn't, like initially when this fight first broke out, that Diddy wasn't necessarily hitting her at first. And so they kind of talked a little bit more about this other woman, and that this girl lived in Miami, that Diddy and Jane had fought previously about this particular woman. She was also someone who was unnamed. And then Jane was explaining that on that night, on June 18th, going into June 19th of 2024, that it was kind of a ball of emotions that night. She had said that this was the first time that she had ever slammed Diddy's head into a counter. She said that this was the first time that she and Diddy even got into a physical altercation. And so Jane was calling him names such as pedophile and disgusting and a monster. And Diddy was kind of Diddy had called her crazy, but this was, the defense was trying to point out that Diddy was calling her crazy after the candles and the glasses were thrown at him. And so then the defense is kind of like trying to piece by piece recount Jane's kind of events of the night, like how she ran into the bedroom and then the bathroom and then the closet, and how she changed into a large dress and why was she still wearing heels and those types of things. And the defense throughout this was kind of pointing out that Diddy didn't put his hands on her up until it became a certain point. And so initially the defense was kind of like, okay, well, Diddy was just kind of following you behind. He was just following you to the bedroom and the bathroom, but just saying things along the lines of, are you not going to talk to me? But from Jane's perspective, she was saying that even throughout all of this, he was still kicking down her doors, because remember, under her direct testimony, the jury saw photos of her broken down doors, or the doors that were just either kicked through or hit through by Diddy. And Jane was telling Diddy to leave and that she hated him. And then again, the defense was going into, okay, well, why were you still wearing like a baggy dress and heels and not wearing activewear? You're someone that works out, so why wouldn't you change into just, I guess, activewear clothes as opposed to what she ended up wearing? And so it felt like the defense at that point was kind of trying to imply that Jane was the agitator in this situation. She was the one who threw the candles first. She was the one who threw the glass first. And that Diddy, around this time frame, because this, if you think about it also in context, it's June of 2024. This was weeks after the CNN video came out that showed the brutal assault video of Cassie and Diddy at the Intercontinental Hotel in 2016. So it felt like at times, Jesse, that the defense was trying to imply that he was still feeling the stress from the CNN video being released, and maybe that is why he had that particular reaction. And so Jane was saying that Diddy did end up kicking her and putting her in a chokehold, and then a little bit later in her testimony, she kind of she explained that the chokehold was through his arm, and because the defense was like, well, we're seeing this video of 5 days later after this particular incident, and you don't have any finger marks around your neck. It doesn't seem like he strangled you doing this, but instead Jane was explaining that Diddy kind of grabbed her by the arm, put her up in a chokehold where she just was kind of just up in the air type of thing. And so the defense was pointing out that she had no discoloration on her neck, but then the defense was saying hours after, or after she was hiding for hours, I should say, that she kept on calling Diddy names, and that Diddy, when she came back from hiding for a few hours, because remember she said that she hid behind a wall for like 2 hours, that after she came back that she was still calling him names, but even after Diddy was calling her names, that he didn't kick her during that time. And it was only while they were on the patio where Jane had punched Diddy in the back of the head. So then Diddy had punched her back and punched her in the eye and punched her in the forehead, and Diddy told her something along the lines of, "You're trying to take my kids away from me, you're trying to take me away from my kids." And so it seemed like, again, from the defense's perspective, I think they were trying to frame this as, okay, well, maybe you're trying to look for something out of this because you just saw this hotel video that came out just weeks ago, and now you're instigating a fight that seemingly kind of came out of nowhere, and you're trying to possibly get something out of it. And so then they kind of got into a little bit more about it after the lunch break, and just that during this time frame, Jane had gotten a hold of the other woman that was allegedly on this family trip, and that this other woman was telling her mean things. Jane was telling her mean things, and then how Jane had to take a shower afterwards, but then Diddy kept slapping her and those types of things. And then Diddy had told her, okay, we have never fought like this. Now that this lawsuit comes out, now you want to attack me. And so I feel like that's where the defense kind of really just was like, okay, it seems like you did have kind of a reason for doing this. And then they got into a fight just about how Jane was over in Vegas for that trip in January of 2024, and that even after the fight, Jane had to put on a hotel night outfit, and then Diddy took Jane's phone to text Anton. Then Diddy saw a message between Jane and Anton about that mutual friend, that being the unnamed rapper that she went on the Vegas trip with. Anton came over about 45 minutes later, according to Jane. At first, Jane and Anton were just kind of making small talk, but then the defense is kind of like, okay, well, when did you have time to put on makeup? You say that you put on makeup to cover up your bruises. And then it was like, okay, well, at any point you could have possibly just drove away and left. You could have left with your car and when you were trying to grab Anton. And so I feel like the defense was like, okay, there were just so many points that had happened during this night. But I think one thing that also stands out is that when Anton had arrived, Diddy and Jane went into a separate room in her home, and Diddy was still upset about this mutual friend that Jane had saw in Vegas, and Diddy told her, how could you go to another man's freak off? Go out there and F him, that being the entertainer that was still inside Jane's home. And then Jane told Diddy no, and then Diddy said, okay, well, is this coercion? And so what ended up happening, Jane took an ecstasy pill. She ended up giving this particular entertainer oral sex. Diddy had no interaction with Anton. During this, they ended up cleaning up the glass before Anton even came over, and that was just kind of the gist. And I know that was kind of a lot, but I feel like the defense's entire point of just this particular piece of what had happened that night was just the reaction from the CNN video.
Well, the prosecution's banking it on being one of the more clear-cut cases of force being used to pressure her into a commercial sex act. And there seems to be the defense saying there's a lot more context, and maybe, and I think it was really interesting what you said, did she have a motivation to instigate this for personal benefit after the tape came out of him appearing to beat up Cassie Ventura? I think that's a really interesting point. But look, the defense was very keen on trying to say today, and during the course of their cross-examination for the last day or so, 2 days or so, that she consented to this. She consented to the hotel nights, that she had all this love for Sean Combs. What came out today? I mean, I know there was a text to the effect of, I feel as your lover, I wanted to please you, and I pushed through, and she wanted to cuddle with him. And then there was this all back and forth about, did she buy him a TV to watch certain movies together?
So Jane said, according to her, that she bought this portable TV so that way that, yes, she and Diddy could watch their movie nights. But she also explained that she and Diddy, or this was a way for her not to have sex with other men for these hotel nights. So instead of having to complete these hotel nights or do these hotel nights, instead she was like, okay, well, I bought him a portable TV screen that was, I guess, the size of just like kind of a computer monitor, so that way the two could watch their videos together instead of her having to actually do the sexual acts with other men. But even as far as just the text messages go too, the defense was showing the jury, I should say, just different text exhibits. For example, on December 20th of 2023, 2023, and this is around the time frame that Diddy had made this note saying that he didn't know how she felt about her wanting to do these hotel nights, where Jane is saying, you only reached out to me because you're waiting for someone else to come over. Diddy said, well, can you please take quiet time to read everything that I said? Thank you, I love you. And Jane was saying that there were moments of intense back and forth during this time period. She said this was a really emotional time frame for us. I really hit my wall here. Come to find out, another woman had the same experience with him, and that being Cassie, when she had just initially reached she had initially filed her lawsuit, and then obviously it was settled the next day, but that there was still love and pain there. Because I think one question that might be on the juror's mind is that you're saying that Cassie's lawsuit affected you so much, you two were on an off period. Why didn't that off period just stay as is, and why did you continue to see him, getting back together as just a couple months later on February of 2024. And then there were just other text messages where the jury heard an audio message from Diddy December of 2023, where Diddy is saying, okay, we should really focus on us at the end of the day. What can we do to make you feel better? Let's get to the solution, move on with your life, so that way you don't feel like I wasted your life. Because Jane around this time was just saying that she was kind of in her mid to late 30s-ish, and that she felt like she wasted like some of the best years of her life having to do these hotel nights, and that she could have been treated better by other people. And so then the jury was shown text December 27th of 2023, where Diddy is again asking, so what's the solution? We're going into a new year. I don't want to fight. And Jane is saying, well, I tolerated and dimmed myself for you, Puff. Don't discredit me. Under direct, Jane had said that Diddy told her that Diddy had told her to charge her for her resentment, and that's where Jane was saying, okay, well, I wasted my time, and that wasted time equal to the amount of $100,000. And so Jane was explaining that she still wasn't planning on filing a lawsuit, and that she had actually told some of her unnamed friends just about Diddy, and that one friend told her to that Jane had set the tone for their relationship. The defense was also bringing messages and even some videos and showing them to the jury, as far as just even post this June fight that had happened in 2024, where just a few days later it seemed like everything was kind of back to normal for Jane and Diddy, where she went over to Diddy's house. They were taking videos together. It seemed like the defense was trying to imply that Diddy was trying to break up with her, and that Jane at the end of the day was kind of like, I guess, not necessarily fine with it, but she and Diddy were still hanging out together, because the jury saw this particular video. We were able to hear this video where Jane is calling Diddy her bestie, and that they're laughing together. And again, this was post this June altercation, but Diddy told her that they'll break up but still be best friends, and that even after the altercation had happened in June, that Diddy and Jane were together intimately post this incident that happened June 18th, June 19th. However, they were together intimately with no entertainer. And so there were just other points during her cross-examination where the defense was kind of pointing out that there were times that an entertainer wasn't involved. There were times that Diddy and Jane, both respectively, were just saying how much they loved and missed one another, and those types of things. There were points where the defense gave all the jurors headphones, so that way they could hear particular voice notes that were sent to Jane and sent to from Diddy too. And I was kind of at first unsure why these particular voice notes weren't just being played aloud for all of us to hear, but I think because of the redactions that needed to be had in terms of just personal matters relating to Jane specifically, as involving her child and even her child's father, as well as possibly this unnamed rapper that went to the 2024 Vegas trip in January. I think that's kind of what had made up for why the headphones were given to the jurors and to the witness and to both parties, as opposed to us listening to all of it.
Yeah, I saw a little reporting that, that the father of her child is wealthy, and, we wonder who that could be. There's been social media speculation about who that could be. But it is interesting to hear this testimony about, whether or not it was consensual, and whether or not we have a clear-cut case of a sex trafficker victim relationship. I understand there was testimony where she even said she missed Paul, right? Diddy's trainer, one of the guys that was allegedly paid to have this sex work with them. By the way, talking about big names, didn't it come up Christina Coram, who, by the way, apparently is not going to testify? We thought that she was going to be a key witness during the course of this trial, Sean Combs' former chief of staff. Jane and Christina Coram not on the same page, right? She didn't like her, or she felt quorum didn't like her?
Yeah, so Kaye was mentioned a little bit towards the end of Jane's cross-examination, where the jury was still wearing their headphones. They were hearing these different voice notes that unfortunately we couldn't hear in the gallery ourselves. But what we did hear is just kind of the transcripts, and I was trying to write them as fast as I could. There was a lot more that was said than what I actually wrote down, but it seemed like the defense was trying to imply that Jane was really just upset just as far as jealousy goes, and just how the other women that were in Diddy's life were treated one way, whereas she was treated a different way. And so Jane had told Diddy, I should have known after the first year that there wouldn't be a trip. And Diddy told Jane, well, don't get it twisted, baby. I still have love for you. I'm dealing with this SHIT with my mom and what's on the news. Because again, context, this was July of 2024, just a couple months after Diddy's homes were raided. A lot of media press about the various lawsuits that have been filed against him, but even just months after Cassie's lawsuit. So Diddy is kind of explaining that he's just dealing with a lot of stuff. His mom was sick. All the stuff that was going on the news, and just saying that he can't deal with her, pretty much saying and being upset that he's not taking her on a trip right now. But Jane had told Diddy, okay, well, trust has been broken on both ends. You and KK, that being Christina Quorum, would have talked yourself into paranoia, because she implied under, I think it was either the cross-examination or the start of the cross-examination, where Jane flat out said that she didn't believe that Christina Quorum even really liked her. And so then the defense kind of really brought up Jane and her finances, her career, what she does as far as OnlyFans go, and that around July of 2024 that Diddy brought up her OnlyFans and the voice note. Again, we didn't hear this particular voice note, but that Jane had been doing OnlyFans around this time period for a few months at this point. And so Diddy told Jane that he doesn't care about them, and I think he was talking about the other women, and Jane was saying, well, why do we always do hotel nights and never traveled privately? Did the other girls pressure you for more trips? And so Diddy also told Jane that you are sneaky and curious. You should be free. I wish you the best love. And Jane told Diddy, well, I went to a birthday, and this is kind of bringing back that Vegas trip that happened in January of that same year. I didn't even have anything post-worthy from our relationship. It was my fault for doing things that didn't align with me to impress you. I had pent-up frustration. And Diddy is telling Jane, well, let's just kind of take a break from one another. And Jane told Diddy, well, my dumb ASS thought if I effed more that I would get a trip. And so I think the defense was trying to imply that, you know, she had some kind of perks that she was getting out of doing these hotel nights, and that she was doing them willingly and possibly in exchange for being treated like a girlfriend. And she has expressed this multiple times while doing her testimony, where she just felt like she just wanted the love and she wanted the affection, that the only reason she did the hotel nights was because of the affection that she and Diddy shared with one another before it. Then the entertainer would come. Then after the entertainer left, that she and Diddy would be alone together, and they would have their private moments, and that those were the special things that she liked about the hotel nights, not necessarily having sex with other men, but it was just the time that she had spent with Diddy all together. And so I thought that there was going to be a point where they were going to talk about Diddy's arrest, how she felt about Diddy's arrest, but really the cross-examination kind of ended with Jane talking about this moment where Diddy threw water on her. And the defense was kind of like, well, why didn't you bring this up beforehand? And you'd only brought this up June 1st of 2025 in your first meeting with the government. And so Tenney was kind of like, okay, well, that was just 5 days before you had testified. And Jane was saying, yes, it was. And so they really ended her cross-examination going into August 2nd of 2020, or excuse me, August 6th of 2024. Jane and Diddy kind of had a fight. Jane told Diddy, I appreciate and love you so much. You're so right. I'm back in love with your behind. You hit me with a pill, that being an ecstasy pill. The love energy is so undefinable. It's electric. And Diddy told Jane that she was in the Hall of Fame. And then they kind of referred to themselves as Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, and they were sending GIFs and emojis to one another, because there are times where they just send a lot of emojis to one another, but that's a modern relationship, right? But that around this time period, because again, context is everything, this is about a month before Diddy's arrest, that Diddy told Jane to find a therapist, not being a couples therapist. So even a month before their arrest, it seems like, despite how she was saying that she felt around December of 2023, that as far as even Diddy being, or it was the plan for Diddy to be arrested, I should say, that she was still kind of fine with how things were within their relationship. Yes, there were up and downs, but it seemed like she was kind of in it for the long run with him until his ultimate arrest the following month.
Yeah, and I know that she basically said that they loved each other. There was toxic stuff going on. I mean, look, it'll be for the jury to determine, was he using fraudulent methods or coercion or pressure on her to get her to engage in sex acts with these men and in different locations, and maybe that does amount to sex trafficking? Or is this more of a transactional, loving, toxic, ugly relationship that's not really a federal crime? It's very, very gray, very, very complicated. But then it became time for the prosecution to try to clean up this testimony. It's redirect. So now you have the prosecution asking her questions once again. What was the focus of the redirect by the prosecution?
Well, it was done by AUSA Maureen Comey, and she really kind of was honing in on just everything that the defense was trying to poke holes at, as far as just her wanting to do these hotel nights and her willingness to do these hotel nights. So right off the bat, Maureen Comey is showing the jury texts from Jane to Diddy where she's saying, I know what you want, baby. I'm just not in the mood. Don't want to make you mad. And Diddy is responding, all good, because under cross-examination, the defense was like saying, oh, okay, Diddy's saying all good, so he's listening to you. This wasn't coercion. You weren't forced to do this. He said all good. But then Diddy had text messaged Paul, one of the entertainers that they used, about an hour and a half later, saying, I need you to persuade her. And so I think that was the point where the government is saying, okay, well, even outside of him telling you everything's all good, you don't have to do these hotel nights, that Diddy went out of his way to text Paul to be like, okay, I need you to persuade Jane to do this hotel night. And Jane, even while she was on the stand for this redirect moment, said she never saw this text message before. And so then Maureen Comey is asking about these kind of lovey-dovey messages that were sent in March of 2023 after Jane and Diddy went on their Turks and Caicos trip, because Jane thought that this was a makeup trip for her birthday that year, and she thought it was just going to be the two of them together. And then an entertainer came, and so the jury saw these text messages from March 19th of 2023, and these were messages from Jane to Paul, where Jane had told Paul, thanks again for coming over. I told him I was overwhelmed to perform. I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm sleepy, and I'm sore. And then to insult me about my bracelet, because during this particular trip, Diddy had given her a very expensive and pricey bracelet, and Jane was explaining that she felt like she was given this bracelet just as a way for her to be pushed to perform during a hotel night. And so she was telling Paul that Diddy was insulting her about her bracelet, and in that moment, he didn't make me feel human. What do you expect from a woman after 24 hours and drugs? We tried to argue about it last night, but he felt like he did nothing wrong, because this entire trip was for the purpose of the two reconnecting again. But Jane was expressing that she didn't want to do a hotel night. She didn't want to be doing this. However, Diddy kind of surprised her with this and made her do this type of thing. And so as far as why she sent these lovey-dovey messages even after the Turks and Caicos trip, Jane was explaining that he being Diddy, is just so good at showering me with affection. I was able to throw the other stuff to the side because, I was saying yesterday when we were talking about just all the text messages that we saw under cross where Jane is really expressing her love and affection for Diddy, it seems like, she expressed this during her testimony too, that she really just loves love, and she loves affection, and she loves romance and all this stuff, and that she likes to please her partners in any type of way. And so it felt like Jane was trying to explain that even though she's sending these messages, even after not wanting to do these hotel nights with other men and not wanting to have sex with these other men, that she would still just throw this to the side, try to forget about it, because she just really wanted the love and affection from her partner. And so then Maureen Comey brought it back to December of 2021. This is the initial stages of their relationship, where Diddy was upset with Jane because Jane wanted to give Don, the entertainer or the escort, a condom, and that no condom was used in that particular hotel night because Diddy didn't like the idea of the entertainers or the escorts wearing condoms while he was watching this. And so then they brought up the text messages between Jane and Cabral, where Jane was saying that she always sent these kind of sexually explicit messages and these really kind of like nice messages to the escorts or the entertainers, and that every time she was in communication with them, Diddy was always around. While he wasn't the one sending the messages, that he was always there and very present. And so Jane was explaining that she never wanted to have sex with Cabral, that she only pretended to enjoy having sex with these entertainers because she was putting on a show for Sean. And so then they kind of get into the extortion, that being Cabral threatening to release one of the sexually explicit videos that was accidentally recorded on his phone, and he ended up selling it to a media company that went unnamed, so we don't know who this media company is, but that Cabral had extorted her for money. And this comes after the Homeland Security investigation raise, and then December of 2023, Diddy also threatened to release sexually explicit videos of Jane as well, and that Jane expressed that she was scared that this would happen. This is a pretty relatively quick time frame because, again, context, Diddy is also telling Jane that he never understood how she felt, but then Jane is telling Diddy in this message that the government was trying to introduce to the jury, but unfortunately they weren't able to see it, that Jane was expressing that she didn't want to be doing these hotel nights. So to hear Jane say under redirect that still in that same month Diddy was threatening to release sexually explicit videos of her too, it was just kind of like, wow. I think the government really was trying to really kind of bring in everything together here. And so even as far as just Jane reading in between the lines and the undertones that Diddy would send to her as far as the "what do you want to do tonight" text, Jane always interpreted that him implying that, or even texting her that, meant that she should set up a hotel night. And she said, I would try to navigate the night to do something else, so she would want to do other things. And she said that even though Diddy didn't want entertainers at his house, that they still had entertainers at his home and at his various homes and at Jane's home too. And she said that she wished she could forget all these hotel nights. And so then she got a little kind of emotional as far as when they got to the jealousy angle of everything, because, and I feel like that's just kind of what maybe that gray area of the confusing point, right? Like, a lot of people are hearing just about the various women that Diddy is dating around this time period, and it seems like at some points that Jane was fine doing these hotel nights if she was getting the other perks that the other women were getting, such as the trips, such as the nice gifts, such as being able to express their love publicly and on social media. And so Jane was getting kind of emotional just recalling the pressure she felt like she had to do in order to complete these hotel nights that the other women didn't have to do. She said, I had to carry that impossible pressure, and she's getting emotional while in the stand, tearing up and crying a little bit. She said, I was asked to hold all that pressure, and she said that she brought up the hotel nights and the jealousy because under the cross-examination, there was one point where Diddy was on a trip with Young Miami, and Jane was like, okay, well, you better get your butt back here or else I'm not going to do a hotel night with you. But Jane was saying that she just kind of brought this up, and she said, why do I have to compromise my boundaries? Why am I always being treated like this? And they weren't. And so then the redirect kind of ended just a little bit about the vulnerability that she and Sean Combs had as far as that he wasn't affectionate when he made Jane do oral sex on Anton, the entertainer, after their physical fight, that he wasn't loving after their fight that they had in June, that he made her take a pill and forced her to take the pill because she was ruining the night. And so I feel like the government did the best that they could to really get together the redirect after seeing that cross-examination. But I think when that recross happened, I think it was a little like, ooh, they're back. And Tenny was a little more fierce than she was under the cross-examination, to the point where I was kind of like, ooh,
well, let's
not
talk
going
about
as
that.
well as I think maybe the government would have liked. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this. So, yeah, I think there are certain messages that really help the government's case, where she says, I'm not a robot, I'm not a porn star, I don't want to be mistreated, and things like that. And really where she talks about how he's tying the hotel nights to him paying rent. So are you using financial control to get what you want? The idea of him threatening to release sex tapes, very similar to Cassie. Is that a form of coercion to get what he wants? But I will tell you, when it was time for the defense to then recross her, right, that felt, like you said, very tense. It felt to me like she wanted to get off the stand. It felt to me she's had enough. Did you get that sense? I mean, it was a little combative, right?
Yeah. It was, because I think for the initial points of the defense's cross-examination of Jane, Timmy Garagos was really kind of approaching it like the two were old friends, that they were just good girlfriends, and she was just asking her questions like a friend would ask. But under this recross, Timmy was kind of like, let's just get to the point and let's get this out of the way. And Jane, I think, too, was kind of like, I've been on the stand for multiple days at this point. I'm ready to stop talking about this. I'm ready to stop talking about this in front of people, even though her identity is concealed. But I think as far as just, you could tell her apprehension of, as far as testifying and recalling all of this. But as far as the recross goes, the defense was kind of like, okay, well, after the June 18th, June 19th fight, you could have driven off, or you could have driven off at any point, but you didn't. Because you hadn't taken any drugs at that time. The alcohol had worn off by that time period. You could have drove off in your car at any chance, but instead what you did was you got in your car and you let in an entertainer into your hotel room. And so the defense was saying that Anton, the entertainer that they used, didn't have Diddy's number. He had Jane's number, but Jane was saying that it was Diddy, the one who used her phone to get in communication with Anton. Then around this time frame too, Jane was being represented by criminal counsel, and she had a lawyer that she didn't even reach out to after this particular incident. And so then they also pointed out that around this time frame, this was a couple months after, or even possibly a couple weeks after, Diddy's homes were raided by Homeland Security investigators, and that they left a card, and Jane didn't use this particular card or contact information to reach out to investigators to report this incident either. And so then the defense was saying that she didn't even tell Anton not to come in, that at any point she could have told Anton that she doesn't want him in her home, that he could have left at any time, again, also after this June 18th, 19 incident. And then the defense was kind of like, okay, well, do you consider yourself a strong woman? You work out every day, you're in good shape, you're in good health. And Jane is saying yes, and then there's kind of like a long pause, and then she kind of utters, but a woman's strength doesn't override a man's. And so I was kind of like, ooh, there's just a little bit of sass with her tone there when she had even said that. And then the defense brought up that Jane had also said not so nice things about Diddy himself, where she called him a pedophile and she called him a monster, and that she threw candles at him, and the wax got on him, and glasses at him. And then the defense brings up that Jane reached out to Cabral to recommend him to this unnamed rapper who was in the lifestyle when she and Diddy weren't together, also kind of insinuating that she wasn't only reaching out to these entertainers or these escorts only when she was with Diddy, that she would do it outside of their relationship too. And then obviously the defense is going to bring up her finances. So they were saying that Jane didn't, because at the end of her redirect, let me just back up just a little bit. Under her redirect, a USA Marine Comey was like, okay, would you trade in all the gifts and presents and everything in, as far as not having to endure the treatment that you got and endure having to have sex with other men and multiple men at some times during these hotel nights? And then the defense was kind of, before I get to what the defense said, Jane said, yes, she would give it all back in order not to do these hotel nights with other men. So then the defense was like, okay, well, does that apply to your home too, the home that you live at with your child? And then Jane also gives a long pause here where she's kind of like, that's kind of a hard question to answer. And so then the defense brings up how much she's making as an OnlyFans creator, where she's making upwards of $10,000, even more a month doing this. And this is a month. And so because her rent is $10,000 a month, I think they were trying to insinuate that she could pay for her own rent if she wanted to, but then she's still catching up on all the debt that she had cured, I should say. Sorry about that. And then also that the defense was pointing out that she gets more than $5,000 a month also in child support. So just off those numbers alone, she's kind of getting more than $15,000 a month. Does she really need the money from Diddy too? But from Jane's perspective, she says it's kind of hard to give up the home that she and her child have made a home. They made a home into that. And so really I feel like there were points, even I was kind of looking at the jurors to get their feel of everything, and I think maybe they were kind of I don't want to say pleased, but I think they were kind of like, oh, whoa, Tenny can come at you a little aggressively, because again, her approach initially was just so soft, very nice and kind, but then under that recross, Tenny was just kind of like, okay, well, she brought a little Mark Garagos there a little bit, and she was her daughter's, her father's daughter there.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, I'm looking right now, it just came in, there are courtroom sketches. Did Jane hug Tenny Garagos, go up to the table and put her arm on her? I mean, if I'm looking at these the right way,
yes.
Is that what happened?
Yes, because Jesse, that was kind of the big moment at the end of the day where because after seeing that recross, I was kind of like, there's no way that Jane has maybe any nice feelings, I guess, towards the defense. But what we did see is her getting off the stand, and she took a little bit of a while to get off the witness stand. And then we were like, okay, what's happening? And then all of a sudden I see her bent over hugging Tinny Garagos, and Tinny, I don't think, was really expecting that, because from what I could see of her, she had no reaction or movement or hugged her back. And so we were kind of like all whispering to one another, we were like, did she hug AUSA Maureen Comey? Did she hug anybody else? What was going on? From what we know, we don't believe she hugged Maureen Comey too, but it was weird that after that recross that she did hug Tinny Garagos. It's unclear if Jane also whispered something to her or what was said during that, but it was kind of an interesting moment that happened at the end of the day that had a lot of us kind of like scratching our head.
What did Diddy do? Was he looking at this?
I think I was so focused on Jane hugging Tinny, I didn't even see him there, because also a marshal was standing in my way too. So I don't know, and I don't know also if maybe Jane was hugging Tinny specifically to kind of have it like translate a little bit to the defendant there. But yeah, it was kind of a very interesting moment. I wish I got Diddy's reaction to that.
Yeah, that is shocking to say the least. Okay, before we wrap things up real quick, right after she leaves the stand, we kind of get an idea of this summary witness, right? So I believe, going to be the last witness for the prosecution. And a summary witness really, typically they're used when you have a lot of evidence, like a lot of voluminous, complex evidence or data, and you can't go through all of it, so they summarize what it is. Did we get a sense of what this information is? Because if I had to be a betting man, if I had to guess why they're doing this, they still need to fit a piece of the puzzle of racketeering, right? To say that this was a criminal enterprise, he had people that he was working with, co-conspirators to commit crimes, cover them up, engage in this pattern of abuse of women. Everybody was on the same page. I got to imagine that's where they're going with this summary witness, right?
Yeah, and I think also what's interesting, Jesse, is that they're saying that the summary witness who might testify tomorrow or even possibly Monday might be one of the first summary witnesses. So we don't know if it'll be just that summary witness or possibly more summary witnesses. But these conversations were happened, it was the end of the day outside of the presence of the jury, but we did kind of get a feel as far as what these various text exhibits are and who they're between. So, for example, the government wanted to use text messages from Diddy's staff, which included Christina Quorum and Fahim and other people who were talking about securing cash for Diddy because they say it goes to the enterprise. Now, obviously, the defense objects to it. They say that the jury would draw inference from this, suggesting that this message and these messages, because I think it was like 49 pages of text messages, would imply that the defendant is guilty and that they say it's prejudicial. Whereas the government says that this shows this particular document, that being the text messages, show that the defendant was requesting money. And so what ended up happening, the judge overruled the defense's objection. So those text messages will be shown in. However, there are text messages between D-Rock and Fahim where Diddy is instructing Fahim, one of Diddy's staffers, to count, I think it was like $1 million in cash that he had in his safe. And the defense was like, well, this has limited probative value, and the jury will also draw negative inference from it because of just the amount of money. And so the judge sided with the defense in that aspect, and that objection was sustained. But there were some text messages between D-Rock and Cassie in the 2017 time period, where Cassie told D-Rock that her door was broken down because of Diddy, that she didn't feel safe inside her home, that Diddy had taken her house keys, and the defense was like, well, there hasn't been enough foundation set, but the judge ruled to overrule that objection, so those text messages will be shown in front of the jury. Then there were some text messages between this man named Guido, who was a drug dealer that another witness testified to, and these messages were between Fahim, where it was 7 long pages of messages, where it was kind of funny. At one point, the judge was like, what does Diddy purchasing flour have anything to do with this case? And then Christy Slavic, one of the AUSAs, one of the prosecutors, was just kind of like, Your Honor, flour means marijuana, and that kind of is talking about Diddy wanting to purchase drugs and a large amount of drugs. And then there was kind of a chuckle in the courtroom, because then everyone's like, oh, the flour. And so the objection was overruled, so the jury will see those text exhibits, and then the final one was just about this ledger that Fahim had in his phone where it was just all about the incoming and outgoing cash. And I think the government really wanted this particular piece of evidence in. However, the judge overruled that, or the judge sustained that objection. So unfortunately, the jury won't be able to see this ledger full of incoming and outgoing cash.
It's interesting, you might not have the testimony of these individuals, but you might have the receipts and the text messages, and maybe that's the value that they're looking at it. Because we all thought that we were going to hear from more individuals, more of the alleged inner circle of Sean Combs for this racketeering conspiracy charge. Maybe not. Elizabeth Millner, thank you so much. Great reporting as always. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.